Hi, everyone. We're actually taping today's podcast on January 23rd, and it has been a week. So, on Monday at my university and across the country, we celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Day. It was also in our nation's capital, the inauguration of a new president. In the South, there was an unprecedented snowstorm that dumped wintry weather all across the Gulf Coast, and that was all just on Monday and Tuesday. Sadly, though, yesterday, Wednesday morning, we were saddened to learn of a school shooting that took place at Antioch High School in Nashville. Reports from the local sources indicated that 2 students were tragically killed and another was injured in that school violence episode. Now, look, that's a topic that I don't cover very much on Teaching Matters. It's not a fun topic to talk about, but at the same time, and as a parent of a middle school teacher, if we don't talk about preventing school violence, the opportunity to solve that problem that will be arduous will never take place. So I think it's important to talk about on platforms like this. There are actions taking place across the country where people are trying to take action to make schools safer. In fact, in the state of Ohio, our state legislature is following legislative actions in 7 other states, including New York, Texas, Florida, and Utah, to enact Alyssa's Law. In Ohio, that's referred to as State Bill 313, which revises Ohio code to both appropriate funding for and to require schools to have wearable panic buttons for teachers that will be intended to promote school safety. In today's episode of Teaching Matters, we'll be discussing the movement to implement Alyssa's Law nationwide, and we will also learn about one technology firm that provides a solution to help aid in those efforts. That's what we'll be talking about on Teaching Matters.
Welcome to Teaching Matters, a podcast exploring all things teaching and learning. Teaching Matters is produced by NPR affiliate WOUV Public Media in Athens, Ohio. And here is your host, Dr. Scott Titsworth, Dean of the Scripps College of Communication at Ohio University.
My guests today are Lori Aldahoff and Will Fullerton. Lori is the founder of the national nonprofit Make Our Schools Safe. The organization's mission is to protect students and teachers while at school and to maintain a culture of safety and vigilance in a secure school environment. Will Fullerton is the senior vice president of governmental affairs at Syntegix. Actually, we've had that company represented on this podcast before. The November 27th, 23 episode of Teaching Matters introduced listeners to the story of Stacy Locke, who is an assistant superintendent in Yakima Public Schools, and we learned about how they used the technology solution of Syntegix in that school district. Will and Lori, thank you both for being on the podcast. It's great to meet both of you.
Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be here.
Lori, I want to start with you and to learn about your organization. Making schools safe is something that is directly tied to you personally, and there's an origin story for it. If you would be willing, I think that listeners would be interested to know how your nonprofit started, why it started, and why this is such a passionate cause for you.
So on Valentine's Day in 2018, my daughter Alyssa was tragically shot and killed at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. She was one of the 17 victims that day. And my husband and I, Dr. Elon Aladef, we turned our pain and grief into action, and we started the nonprofit organization, Make Our Schools Safe.
And in terms of the purpose of your nonprofit, it's multifaceted. I know that obviously we'll be talking about the fact that you're an advocate for Alyssa's Law, but I want to talk about some of the other things that your nonprofit does. You have a motto or a sort of a visual representation on your website where you say your voice is your power. And power represents certain, I would say, ideals that you think are important. Can you kind of talk about that and how that sort of provides a framework for what your organization is trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so my organization focuses on 3 main things. One is passing Alyssa's Law nationwide. Secondly is our MOS clubs, where students use their voice for school safety, specifically at their school. Their voice is their power. And then thirdly, we help to raise money. We've raised over $500,000 and given back to schools to help to implement different school safety hardening projects at their schools, like fencing, mental health programs, bulletproof glass.
Mm-hmm. Will, the two of you have worked alongside each other in this process. What is the state? I guess first, what is Alyssa's law? How would you describe that? And there are some similarities that exist in the states that have already passed it. What is Alyssa's law, and sort of where is the state of where that law has been passed nationally, and where you're trying to work to get it passed? Sort of the state of affairs of it right now.
Yeah, so Lori and I have known each other for a few years now. Alyssa's law requires panic buttons in schools that connect directly to 911 first responders. The idea is to compress time in these extreme emergencies so we can save lives. Time equals life, as Lori, as the tagline is there, make our schools safe. And so everything we do at Centegix is to kind of compress that time in response, whether it's an extreme emergency with an active assailant or, kind of the everyday emergency in schools. We've passed it, as you noted, in 7 states so far. Lori did New Jersey and Florida before we met. I wasn't with the company back then. And then New York, Texas, Tennessee, Utah, and Oklahoma have also passed it. And right now, we've seen it filed this legislative cycle. It's kind of back to school season, so to speak, for legislators. We've seen it in another 8 states, if you don't count Ohio. And if you do, right, we've seen it in the Senate be filed by Senator Michelle Reynolds, and we're pretty confident we'll see the House version introduced next week.
Good.
Utah was the first one to kind of codify wearable. And the idea behind that is, every teacher, every educator, every staff member on campus creates additional eyes and ears for on-campus responders, as well as, kind of offsite in that pressure dynamic of emergencies. And it's just an easy way to kind of more of a carrot than a stick, if you will, on compliance, right? We're not going to chase teachers around making sure they have their Alyssa's alert. But the state of Florida was interested in how to progress the policy, how to iterate. And they said, look, we don't want to put teachers in timeout or fine them or punish them. How would we go about it? Well, if everybody's got to wear it, just like, teachers have to wear their badges to get in and out of doors around the building, that's just a way to make sure everybody's got it. Hopefully they never need it, especially in the case of an active assailant. But the chances are, something is going to happen, right? That might not necessitate a full school lockdown. A child's choking, somebody's having a seizure, cardiac arrest, whether it's a student or an educator. And that's kind of the progression of the policy we've seen since really Florida took it up and passed it in 21. And we think there's probably another 10 states that have either contacted us or Lori and said, hey, we'd really like to do that. And so what we do kind of as a team or together and separate, Lori is the strongest advocate you could possibly imagine, but we try to provide some best case, or I should say best in class, or at least lessons learned. And so if we're connecting folks in Utah with Florida and Georgia, Texas, Michigan, Ohio, all of these school safety chiefs kind of can get together and say what makes sense. School safety is one of these weird positions where it's not completely the police and it's not completely educators and admins. It's both. And so if I'm the sheriff or the police chief, I don't spend all day every day in a school. And if I'm the principal or a teacher, superintendent, I don't spend every day in law enforcement and in responding to 911 emergencies. So you've got to get all these people at the table. And then, the most important stakeholders obviously are our students. And everybody's got a vested interest in education, parents, teachers, taxpayers. And so you're big on opinions. And all we try to do is talk about school safety standards. Right. So that we can iterate as we go, because threats don't change. Or I should say threats do change, and you kind of got to update security and safety so that we can spend as much time on instruction, right, and learning and growing in schools.
That's a good point. I mean, whether you're talking about health issues that could take place in a classroom, which actually the previous interview I did with your, about your technology, the superintendent talked about a health issue where the panic button was able to get responders there to help save a person. Whether you're talking about health or safety issues, all the solutions are multifaceted. And so it seems to me that the technology solutions that your company provides is part of a much larger strategy for making schools safer, across the board. Lori, when I come back to you, I mean, I've heard about Alyssa's Law for a couple of years now. How did it come to be? How did Alyssa become sort of the face of this law? My reading suggested that maybe it started out in New Jersey, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, so in 2018, when the tragedy happened, shortly after, one of the moms whose Alyssa was friends with her daughter and they rode the school bus together, she contacted me and she said that we have this panic button bill and we would love to honor Alyssa and name it Alyssa's Law. And then the governor, it ended up going through the legislative process, and then the governor signed it into law.
Hmm.
And then that's what started it all.
And as you're an advocate for this law nationwide, perhaps working at least in tandem with Will and I assume others, how do you sort of interface with people in other states? I mean, is it that they are reaching out to you and bringing you into the conversation? How does that sort of work?
So we have our Make Our School Safe clubs, our MOS clubs. So we actually have students from the MOS club that will reach out to their legislator. We'll have students go to the Capitol and walk around and kind of lobby for
Hmm.
Alyssa's Law and speak to it. I've also had legislators reach out to me directly wanting to get information about it. They know and they see that this has been proven to be effective in saving lives. The Appalachia shooting, they used the wearable panic button and it helped to save lives. They were able to get to the shooter faster and to stop the shooter from killing more people. And when I was thinking about, on during our tragedy, I remember texting my daughter Alyssa. I told Alyssa to run and hide, that help was on the way. But unfortunately, as we know, that help didn't get there fast enough. So having this type of technology, whether it's a medical emergency, which we have predominantly every day in our schools, or unfortunately, if we have a school shooting, we can get help there faster and will save lives.
Hmm. Will, as she was holding up, for those of you watching this on YouTube, she was holding up one of the badges. Will, if she were to press that in a school building, can you sort of describe what happens immediately?
Yeah, you hit on it in transition. We're part of the solution, right? It
Hmm.
takes training and drilling, SROs, nurses, whole the whole campus. We are part of a layered approach. But if she was to press that, the button actually has two uses. If she were to press it 3 times, the local response team, principal, secretary, nurse, SROs, et cetera, that's designated by the admin per campus. They would get an alert on their phone, their devices, similar to an Amber Alert. That gives the teacher's location within, we say classroom level location, because the way our system is implemented and we digitally blueprint those buildings, so they'll know where that teacher is. They can quickly get on site to where the call for help is, or from which the call for help has come, and attend to whatever that kind of like non-extreme emergency, non-lockdown style
Hmm.
event is. Now, if she keeps pressing it, the magic number is 8. When we train it, we say keep pressing it until we take over the intercom. We have strobes throughout the building that flash red, and then there's a desktop takeover for every device on campus, or every school device on campus. So it's audible, it's visual. You can't miss it, is the theory there.
Hmm.
And that triggers, now it's a state level policy decision. In Florida, that's an automatic message to 911 where we give them a digital package. Hey, Mark, the Smith High School is under lockdown. Here's the digital blueprint. This is the first alert that was activated, and dispatch can send that out in cars en route, but they can start worrying about getting on scene while the on-campus responders are responding to, if it's an active shooter, those SROs can come running to hopefully subdue or at least neutralize the threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mitigate the loss of life, if not prevent it, all loss of life. And then it's, first responders on campus. When they get there, they do what they do, whether it's medical, fire, or law enforcement.
Lori, the technology that Will's describing obviously is something that could be crucial when when an event happens. The Moss clubs that you were talking about are very proactive in trying to create a culture in the school that promotes safety. Can you kind of talk about what those clubs are and how your organization supports them?
Yeah, so when the tragedy happened, if you remember, the students were very vocal about gun control. But I wanted our Moss clubs through Make Our Schools Safe to just be focusing on school safety. As Will was saying, our kids are going through these lockdown drills, and it's kind of pretty traumatizing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Moss clubs, they're being empowered to have a voice for school safety at their school. They're empowered to have conversations with their principals and SRO officers to be a part of the conversation. If they see something, say something, and we can proactively prevent violence from happening before it happens. If kids see what's going on their Snapchat, they know, and they can do something about it and take this proactive advancement in being able to have that voice to make a change and to make a difference at their schools. They could also apply for school safety donations from Make Our School Safe, and then we can help to fund different school safety projects at their schools. And then also the students, by being proactive to try to pass Alyssa's Law in their state, they really feel like they're making a change and making an impact and making a difference.
This culture issue is really important. Will, has Centegix been able to observe, okay, a district partners with you, they start using your technology in the ways that you described, so it's there. That obviously provides an important safety net. Just the implementation of that type of a safety net, have you observed ways in which that begins to promote a culture of awareness, sort of like what Lori is describing with the Moss clubs?
It does. And I think it's, when you talk about school safety, we talk about it in kind of three domains: preparedness and prevention, response, and then recovery, and then the aftermath. And often we don't talk enough about response, which is exactly what Alyssa's Law is designed for, right? That's the intent. We spend a lot on prevention and training and drilling. But I've got two boys that are in first and second grade. They've gone through active shooter drills since they were 3 years old. So there is some awareness there that these students are aware of protocols, right? In the most extreme. And if evil is going to be evil, they're going to be aware of how the school is going to respond. From the anecdata and what we've seen across the country in our schools from an educator perspective, the peace of mind of knowing that if I need help, whether it's extreme or every day, that help is going to come when I need it, does have a great impact, right? It takes a little bit of the pressure out of the tire, a little bit of anxiety out of the classroom. When students know that SRO, that principal, those responders are going to be there almost immediately, maybe they think twice, right, about throwing a colossal fit in school or picking a fight in the hallway. It does, and we have educators say that to us. Say, I didn't know what I was going to do, if I had an incident. Like, my walkie-talkie's not working. I have no cell phone coverage in my classroom. I didn't know how I was going to call for help. So I think absolutely, and teachers who have that peace of mind feel safe and secure at school. That translates into students feeling the same. And just like the National Free and Reduced Lunch Program, hungry kids can't learn, right? hungry teachers can't teach. Scared teachers and scared kids can't learn and grow either, right? And again, back to that intent of what schools are for. We add a little bit of that. That sense of security. It might be the only safe place a kid has all day and all week, right? And that's what it should be, without threat of constant disruption, distraction, and certainly in that most extreme, a quick, within seconds and minutes response, from local on site to the 911.
But I think also at the end of the day, as parents, we want to make sure and know that when we send our kids to school, they're going to be safe, right? And they're going to come home alive. And so it is so important as a school board member, as a mother, as a parent, that we provide this safety for our children.
And thinking back to Parkland, where you are a school board member, you're using you're using technology in your school to do this. Have you observed success stories? Maybe not at the level, but I mean, have you seen examples where the use of the button has been able to have benefits for teachers and students?
Yeah, so we have the Safer Watch app, and we are going to, by the start of next school year, have the wearable panic button. But we've already seen with, we call it Alyssa's Alert, being used where it's helped in medical emergencies and helped to get help there faster.
Yeah. Well, I think a final question for you, since you look at this sort of at a national landscape. What's a best case scenario? I mean, I know that you said you're working with several states right now where it's on the docket, including Ohio. How, if things go well, is it feasible that we could have this, pretty much across the country in the next year or so? I mean, I know legislatures don't move quickly, but at the end of the day, if you look at the states that have done this, it's not just red states, it's not just blue states, it's states that really want to take safety seriously. This seems like a no-brainer. And what will it take for this to become more omnipresent throughout the country, do you think?
I think that's happening, right? Since 2018, it's been passed in states, so you get iterations, lessons learned along the way. Just the amount of activity we've seen, I think, is really it's promising, right? And I promised to Lori a couple years ago we're going to pass it in every state, and at the federal level, which we're having talks up there as well. And I think what's important is we are still paying plenty of attention and spending plenty of dollars on prevention, hardening schools where it makes sense, when it makes sense, requiring SROs, all of these things that are important in a layered approach, right? I think response is really, folks are starting to realize, okay, what are we going to do when something happens on campus? And that's a big step. I use an analogy, to fire pools and fire alarms in schools, right? 50 years ago, we decided as a country that fire alarms needed to be in schools. No one's died in a school fire in about that time. This is the same kind of concept. This is a basic tool that should be required in the toolbox, so that campus-wide notification is there, so that immediate 911 conversation is there. Because you don't want a teacher who's hiding with their kids in a corner on the phone with a dispatcher, right? You don't have that time. These things last 3 minutes, maybe. So it's made that progression. You've seen success stories, and I think that's what's most positive. Up to a couple dozen states could adopt the measure this year, and I feel really positive that this Congress will as well. There's been a federal Alyssa's law that's kind of sat there and gotten tangled up in partisan back and forth. We're a nonpartisan bill. We passed unanimously in Texas. It passes unanimously everywhere it goes. It is not a controversial policy, and no longer is it an unfunded mandate either. It's an allowable expense. We're increasing school safety dollars, and then we're mandating. Whether we give districts or schools state by state a school year or two to vet, all the solutions out there and make a choice. so that compliance isn't there. You don't have a summer to figure it out, I guess is the short way
Yeah.
of trying to say it. But as that evolves, it provides a really good conversation into how many assets can we provide to SROs, school nurses, 911 first responders as immediately as possible, while still letting everybody on campus know, hey, this is a lockdown, this is serious. Go into your protocols, lock the door, get behind something hard, and wait for help to come. And that's kind of the mishmash. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of school shootings in the last several years. I'm based in Texas. I had just started working for the company about 2 months before Robb Elementary. And had just met Lori. And I think it hits home when something like that happens. This is senseless loss of life from, the greatest treasure we have as a country is our kids. And I don't just say that because I'm partial as a dad. And so it's an important conversation that moms and dads and educators are all having to say, hey, how do we, excuse me, how do we make sure we feel safe and secure at school so that kids feel safe and secure at school, so that we can focus on what we're there to do, which is learning and growing every day. And you have to take the other worries out of it. And that is increased quick lines of communication and rapid mass notification in the extreme.
Yeah. Last question, and Lori, I know you have to get going, but really quickly, Alyssa was a soccer player and her number was the number 8, and that has become an important symbol for your organization. Can you kind of quickly explain why that's the case?
Yes, so Alyssa was captain of her soccer team. On her soccer jersey, she wore the number 8. And when you turn the 8 sideways, it's the infinity symbol, which means forever. And then in our logo, we've put the infinity symbol and Make Our School Safe logo. So we make our school safe in honor of Alyssa.
Yeah. I want to thank you both for being on. This is such an important message that is relevant to every single community across this country and, perhaps even broader than that. And I just want to thank both of you for doing the work that you're doing. We all recognize, Will, what you said, that we all have a vested interest in this, and it takes warriors like you all to raise awareness, and the students that are in the MOS organizations to raise awareness. Everyone's important in this. And so thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you,
Scott.
Absolutely. My guests today were Will Fullerton. He's the Senior Vice President of Legislative Affairs at Syntagix, and then also Lori Al-Hadaf. She's the founder of Make Our Schools Safe. If you want to learn more about either of the organizations, we'll have links to their organizations in the text accompanying the podcast. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to the associate producers, Trinity Sweet and April Koska, for the work they do behind the scenes. Please feel free to reach out to us if you would like to suggest ideas. You can simply email us at teachingmatterspodcast, all one word, all lowercase, teachingmatterspodcast@ohio.edu. Thanks, and we hope everyone has a great day.